Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. It's wonderful to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio. I do want to apologize before anybody says anything about the gap between my last segment and this one. Okay, some things got in the way there, but we're back here and we're going to continue our journey here on Points of Light Radio. And today we will continue by fellowshipping with a gentleman named David Scheer. Mr. Scheer is a member of the Grand United Order of Oddfellows and the Independent Order of Oddfellows. Okay. Now, if you recall, we've discussed and fellowshipped with members of those lodges here on Points of Light Radio in previous segments. If you haven't viewed those particular segments, I urge you to go back and have a look. Actually, very fascinating. But Mr. Scheer is also a member of the Noble Order of Muscovites. Okay. And that's the organization that he's here to discuss today. Right. Now, just to give you a brief background, I'm going to let him expand on this. But just to give you some background on the Noble Order of Muscovites, it started out as the Imperial Order of Muscovites. And it was founded in 1894 as an independent and unrecognized body of the Independent Order of Oddfellows. And the Independent Order of Oddfellows, as I said, they didn't recognize the Independent Order of Muscovites and actually tried to shut it down. I'm going to let my guest expand on this a little further. Okay, but the order survived under a new name until the 1960s when Klaus Scheer, a former member and member of the Grand Master of the Oregon Oddfellows, he preserved their ceremony until he and his son, who you will be meeting today, revived the degrees as a charity fundraiser for open to anyone. Now, the basic body of the Muscovites is called the Kremlin. Its officers are styled as the Tsar, the Patriarch, the Regent, Commander, and so forth. Right? Now, why am I doing all the talking here? Okay, let's go talk and fellowship with Mr. Scheer. But are you still hungry for knowledge? Are you still seeking for the light? Then just trim your lamp and follow me. Mr. Scheer, welcome to Light Radio. So, you are the secretary of the Peninsula Lodge 128, Independent Order of Oddfellows. You're also the elective secretary of the Northern Star Lodge 715, Grand Order, United Order of Oddfellows, and the Kremlin of the Baku Noble Order of Muscovites. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, shall we say?
I grew up in an Oddfellow family. My father and mother are Oddfellows. My grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather were all Oddfellows. And I benefited a lot from going to the lodge and meeting people, making friends. And when I was in high school, I won the Pilgrimage for Youth, went on that trip. And I joined the Oddfellows at 16. So I have now been an Oddfellow for 42 years.
Oh, well, what's this Pilgrimage for Youth, by the way? What exactly is that?
The Pilgrimage for Youth is an amazing program that the Independent Order of Oddfellows puts on. There are speech contests that are held at local lodges, and the winners, which are teenagers, high school students who are either sophomores or juniors, get to go on an all-expense-paid trip to the East Coast, where they go to the Smithsonian. In New York, they see a Broadway play. They go to the United Nations. They travel all over the East Coast, learning about the history, and at the same time getting to meet other kids their age from all around, not just the United States, but many other jurisdictions where the Independent Order of Oddfellows are.
Wow, I never heard of this. This is very interesting. And I suppose you'd agree that's a great way to introduce people to a fraternal order, like at that age. Wouldn't you agree? And kind of give them a connection to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when they come back, they're asked to give a presentation to the lodge that sponsored them, and often to also go and give presentations at high schools about the trip that they took.
Okay. Now, you're here today to discuss the Imperial Order of Muscovites. Tell us a little bit about this, the Order of Muscovites. What exactly do they do?
Yeah. Well, to begin with, the Imperial Order was the original order, which came up with the degree in 1893 and really became an established organization in 1894. And what they were was just a fun side order of the Oddfellows, and their mission, their goal, was to bring entertainment, bring fun to the lodges, and at the same time raise money for the Oddfellows charities.
Wow. And what are the qualifications to join the? Now, if I remember correctly, you told me you don't have to be an Oddfellow. It originally started through the Oddfellows, as I understand it. But you don't have to join an Oddfellows Lodge to do this anymore. Is that true?
Correct. So the Muscovites have gone through a number of different stages. When they were first formed, the group that started the Imperial Order, which was in the Midwest in Ohio, they required that you be an Oddfellow. However, in 1908, the West Coast broke off and became the Improved Order of Muscovites.
Uh-huh.
And the Improved Order of Muscovites, the Muscovites and a number of other groups were under pressure from the Sovereign Grand Lodge because they were requiring Oddfellow membership for these groups, but the groups were not under direct Sovereign Grand Lodge control. So Sovereign Grand Lodge said, all right, you cannot have these groups, you cannot have members being selected just from Oddfellows and not be under Sovereign Grand Lodge control. And at that point, the Improved Order in the Pacific Northwest said, wow, that's a great idea. Let's let anybody join as long as they are a individual with good character, and they focused particularly on people who were members of fraternal orders. And the Muscovites went through a number of other changes, and there was the Improved Order. Then the Sovereign Grand Lodge said everyone needed to join, all the fun groups needed to become part of Amos. And the Muscovites in the Pacific Northwest, they temporarily joined Amos, but they decided they wanted to become Muscovites again, so they reformed as the Royal Order, which lasted into the 70s, at least into the 70s. We know from records in the Grand Lodge proceedings here in Oregon. And then they just kind of died out as the order was shrinking. And recently it came back as the Noble Order of Muscovites, as a lot of the lodges in Portland and in Oregon are growing again and getting a lot of young members, and having this fun group is something that was really exciting to them.
And what would you put that down to, the growth?
The major focus, the reason why we have growth, there's really two reasons. Number one is a reimagining of what the purpose of the Oddfellows is. And this reimagining is kind of going back actually to more historic ideas of a lodge, where our lodges are acting more as community centers and doing a lot more offering classes and offering activities, plays, etc., for the community to come in. The other thing is, especially since COVID, people are looking for community, and a community that has more meaning to it than, say, just the people that you know at a bar or some other situation like that, but a community that gets together and has that feeling of connection and accomplishment.
Okay. Now, let's break this down. You were also a member of the Grand United Order of Oddfellows and the Independent Order of Oddfellows, right?
Correct.
What would you say is the key differences between those two?
Well, the Grand United Order of Oddfellows, first it's important to note that the Grand United Order of Oddfellows came first, and the Independent Order of Oddfellows in the United States and the Independent Order of Oddfellows Manchester Unity, they are independent from the Grand United Order. So Grand United Order is the parent organization. There are differences in the ritual, differences in the degrees, and for example, how a lodge room is set up. But at its core, we have the same values, we have the same symbolism and focus on friendship, love, and truth. And for me, what I really love is really being able to deepen my understanding of Oddfellowship because of the teachings that I am learning in the Grand United Order.
Can you attend each other's meetings, or is there?
So with Manchester Unity, the Independent Order members can visit Manchester Unity lodges, and Manchester Unity can visit Independent Order lodges. We do not have a system of interfraternal visitation between Grand United Order and Independent Order, but there is a movement that I think is really gaining ground for people to join both orders. And by doing so, they are known as being double odd, so I am double odd. By doing so, it does something that I think is extremely valuable, in that it supports and promotes both orders without losing either tradition. So if there was a merger, then there would be something lost in that merger. Whereas by having this double odd movement, we are able to gain and benefit and learn very valuable things from both orders.
So what is the makeup now? You're involved in the Grand United Order. You're also, like I said, involved in the Independent Order as well as the Kremlin. What would you say the makeup of your lodges are right now?
What do you mean by the makeup? Sorry.
Men, women, young, old, the demographic, shall we say?
All right. So, Peninsula Lodge, which I belong to, the Independent Order, that is a very young order. Aside from my mother, who is still a member and is 93,
Wow.
I am probably about the oldest member at 58. My sister is a member and she is 62. But other than that, most of the members are in their 20s or 30s primarily. My Grand United Order Lodge is very young. Probably almost all the members are in their 30s or 20s. And with the Grand United Order, there is still a men's lodge and a women's lodge. So the Odd Fellows and the Household of Ruth. So that is different than the Independent Order, which has gone completely co-ed. And with the Muscovites, again, it is has many young members, but there are also a lot of older members who remember back when the fun orders like the Muscovites and like Amos were very big and very popular, and they have joined because they love seeing this part of the tradition come back.
Okay. And I just want to bring this up as well. You can join now, and I think you'll agree with me. One of the things that has attracted some of these younger members is this virtual degree now, that you can actually join by virtual degree.
Yeah, so that is something that came out of the COVID pandemic. We were actually scheduled to put on a live degree at Peninsula Lodge, and the whole event got shut down by the COVID pandemic. And one of the things that we're really fortunate with is that at Peninsula Lodge, we have 3 theater companies. And the heads of these theater companies and many of the actors are members of the lodge. So while the lodge was completely shut down and you weren't supposed to be around other people at all, our members of the lodge who were Muscovites and took part in the degree had been practicing to put the degree on. They got together over Zoom and came up with the idea to set up a green room in the lodge. And they went up there and one actor at a time performed their lines, acted out their parts to the degree in the green room, videotaping it with their cell phones. And then we edited the whole thing together with a very elaborate backdrop. And so it was something that never would have happened if it wasn't for the COVID shutdown. And the amazing thing is that there were people all over the United States and all over the world who knew about the Muscovites and wanted to join, but it just wasn't feasible for them to travel to a location where the degree was being put on. And so because of the virtual degree, we have been able to bring in members from all over Europe, Cuba, Brazil, Philippines. The Muscovites really took off. It's very, very popular there.
Yeah.
And just we've been able to reach so many people that we would have probably reached eventually, but by just doing live degrees, it probably would have taken decades to see the growth that we made in just a couple years.
And I got to commend you on that, because it's one of the things that over the course of this podcast, and we've discussed this before as well, is the need for lodges of whatever fraternalism to really get with the times in many cases. And you've done that with your lodge. I think that's wonderful. And I think going forward, it's something I think you'll agree, lodges, no matter what stripe or fraternity, need to really adopt some of these ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that it's really very, very important to, especially in order to really thrive and to move into the future, you have to have young members. You cannot bring a lodge into the future only with elderly members.
And these youngsters you're talking about are tech savvy. They love virtual stuff.
They love virtual stuff. They are very tech savvy. They want to contribute to lodges. They want to help bring lodges into the future. They're very eager to do it. And to some members, that's scary. And so they shut them down. And instead of wanting to make lodges fit in with the modern world, they want to take modern young people and somehow bring them back to fit in with the old model of lodges. So I think that to really make progress, we have to let the younger generation contribute and give their, help us to move forward into the new generation.
I agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. And I think our goals are the same, like we were talking about before, of moving fraternalism forward, taking it forward, helping it thrive. And I think this is a big part of it. But, what do you feel that you've been in these three different orders that you talk about, the Independent Order, the Grand United Order, as well as the Muscovites? What do you feel it's done for you?
The biggest thing it's done, first of all, I have learned so many skills by being a secretary, by being a Noble Grand, by being a trustee in the Muscovites, by being a bear. There's just so many different roles that I have been able to take part in and be trained in by people who have gone there before. And so I've learned many skills. And through the lodge, through our connections with the community, I have been able to achieve many things that, were dreams, pipe dreams of things I would love to see happen in community to help out the less fortunate and those who are going through hard times, that I would never have the resources to be able to make any of those things come true. But with the community at the lodge and my brothers and sisters through fraternalism, we're able to put our resources and our knowledge and our skills together to have a really big impact on the community at large.
What do you think you could do for those who are thinking of joining?
I think the biggest thing that we can do is give them our time. People that are interested in joining, a lot of times what we're looking what some lodges are looking for is to just get them in as quickly as possible and then put them in a chair and make sure that we can make a quorum. And what we do in my lodges is we really focus in on sharing with them our experiences and our experience, sharing with them how a lodge works, teaching them how they can bring their ideas to the lodge as motions, helping them to formulate those motions, so on and so forth, and teaching them the history of our lodges. One of the things that we have at Peninsula is we have the Museum of Odd History, and members of the community come in all the time and they walk around and they see the tremendous impact that both the Independent Order and the Grand United Order had on the development of Portland, and how at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, so many people in Oregon and in Portland in particular, which is featured in our museum, they were helped by the Oddfellows, helped by both Independent and Grand United lodges, and they received so much security in developing this new life out here that they never would have had without the lodges.
Well, Mr. Scheer, I appreciate your time today. I really do. And I look forward to having you back. I'd love to have you back. You really do have a lot of history when it comes to the Oddfellows.
I would love to come back again. And thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you for taking the Muscovite degree.
Thank you, sir, for the good of the Tsar. David Scheer, brothers and sisters. All right. You let the cat out of the bag. Yes, I did take their virtual degree yesterday. You can think of me any way you want for doing that, but I will say this. The degree was a lot of fun. It was a virtual degree. It's available to anybody. I'm going to say that, like he said, I'm going to reiterate what he said. Available to anybody. But it's also, my thoughts on it were, it was a lot of fun, but they also, you could feel the fellowship as you were taking the degree, that you were, what you were getting involved in. And they managed to make it feel very individualized, even though it was done corporately. And there was a number of people in on that, like he talked about, from all over the world, from the UK, different parts of the United States. It's wonderful. And it's wonderful to have that. And, you know, I love what Mr. Scheer talked about. He discussed the skills learned, like my previous guests have here on Points of Light Radio. You get what you put in to fraternalism. You really do. And that seems to be a reoccurring theme. If you think back on some of the previous segments I've done here, you get what you put in, right? It's great to hear that Odd Fellowship is alive and growing and thriving as well, where he is. And hopefully in other parts, I do know that in other parts of the world it is as well. Like he talked about the Philippines. It's huge over there, right? And I love how he's been working to modernize Odd Fellowship and these orders he's in by using the methods we discussed here today, you know, going virtual with a lot of lodge business. I think that's wonderful, right? But he's doing this all while preserving the history of Odd Fellowship. You know, he has that, it's very important. And he has that museum he talked about where they do where they encourage people to come in and view the history of it. And I think that's very important. We need to modernize but preserve history. And I've talked about this with previous guests as well. We need to do that, right? I do want to get a video, shall we say, of that museum. I'm going to try to get him to send me a video of that, because I want to show that to you. I really do. I want to have a look in that museum. right? And his goals do line up with that of Points of Light Radio, with the goals of this podcast. You know, we need to raise awareness and preserve the history, right? And I'd love to have Mr. Scheer back, and I will. In fact, I'll say that right now. But I'm afraid that's really all I have time for right now. I want to take this segment actually straight to air. So before I go, though, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. You can see the link to my Twitter handle in the details section of this podcast, as well as the link to my Spotify channel. Brothers and sisters, it's been a pleasure fellowshipping with you here today. But until we meet again, just step into the light.